religious implications. Known by the Jewish community as Tamaim, the impure ones, the Jewish slave traders eventually organized themselves into synagogues, social clubs, and cemeteries, and looked to the Kehillah for recognition. The Jewish community, or the Kehillah, took strong steps to prosecute and ostracize these Jews. Perhaps because of the slave traders, or in spite of them, the authority of the Kehillah united in this period and were made strong in Argentina throughout the rest of the century. About 40,000 Jews settled in these colonies founded by the JCA at the peak of the operation, but this didn't last for more than a few decades as the second and third generations moved to more urban areas, and today 90% of Argentinian Jews live in Buenos Aires. Next, I'll be discussing farming in Europe. After the Holocaust, there were many survivors who were now displaced persons with no home or family to go back to after the war was over. The DP camps have been established by the Allied forces and managed by the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration. Survivors were taught to farm in preparation for an agricultural life in Palestine. This picture was taken at Kibbutz Buchenwald, which was established by survivors of various concentration camps, and it was a pioneer training group which helped the survivors learn farming techniques so that they could immigrate to Palestine. And then this is another staged photo with the young men in their best clothing holding the farming equipment. And the sign in the background says Bruchim Habayim, which means welcome. And they seem to look hopeful for a fresh start in the Jewish homeland. And the need for DP camps dwindled with the establishment of the State of Israel. About 2/3 of the DPs emigrated to Israel, while most of the rest moved to the US, which had loosened its immigration quotas. And the last Jewish DP camp in Germany was closed in 1953. The kibbutz movement was started by young pioneers who believed in Zionism returning to the land, as well as the ideals of socialism. They drained the swamps, and the kibbutzim became profitable enterprises as the economy was based entirely on agriculture at first, and then agriculture was combined with industry. While the kibbutz movement never really represented more than 5% of Israel's population, it had an enormous impact. The kibbutzim, as the saying goes, made the desert bloom. They also made huge contributions to an infant nation. Their agricultural innovations helped to feed it, and their boundaries helped to define Israel's borders. Baron de Rothschild he made his fortune from banking, but he became a leading proponent of the Zionist movement, financing the first site at Rishon LeZion in Palestine. Rothschild's goal for the establishment of a Jewish homeland was to return the Jews from Europe to farming and business and away from the religious centers, so he promoted industrialization and economic development. In 1924, he established the Palestine Jewish Colonization Association, which acquired more than 125,000 acres of land and set up business ventures. Rishon LeZion was founded on July 31st, 1882, and the Rishon LeZion pioneers endured many hardships, including a shortage of water. With no prior experience in farming, they tried to grow wheat and barley, however, the crops failed. The farmers received agricultural training from experts that Rothschild sent, and they were able to dig a well and also discovered that the soil was perfect for growing grapes for wine. Following a visit by Baron de Rothschild in 1887, construction of the Carmel wine cellars began, and the wine quickly became famous and was sold primarily among Jewish communities throughout the world. Today, Rishon is one of the most developed cities in Israel, near Tel Aviv, and I believe it's the 4th largest city in Israel. In 1854, Judah Toro, a wealthy American Jew, died having bequeathed money to fund Jewish residential settlement in Palestine. And Montefiore, a close friend, was appointed executor of his will and used the funds for a variety of projects aimed at encouraging the Jews to engage in productive labor. In 1855, he purchased an orchard on the outskirts of Jaffa that offered the first agricultural training to the Jews of the Ottoman Empire living in Palestine. And Montefiore built the Montefiore windmill in Yemen Moshe to provide cheap flour to poor Jews, a printing press and textile factory, and helped to finance several agricultural colonies. He also attempted to acquire land for Jewish cultivation but was hampered by Ottoman restrictions on land sale to non-Muslims. Ein Harod kibbutz on the left was founded in 1921 and was the first large kibbutz in Israel. The kibbutz was founded by the people of the second and third Aliyah, and it gets its name from the Harod spring nearby. It's located in the Jezreel Valley in northern Israel, which has fertile ground and was the main road for delivery of goods and a gateway between the Middle Eastern countries. So in conclusion, in 19th and 20th century, Jewish farming was reestablished around the world as a means for Jews to have a livelihood after immigrating to a new country. Jewish farming would not have been reestablished without the financial resources from very successful Jews living in Europe who had a vision to help those who had been persecuted in their homelands. Jewish farming in Palestine was a critical component to Zionist movement because it helped Jews living there to be self-sufficient. And lastly, what I found to be most interesting was the unforeseen consequences of the Jewish gauchos living in the Pampas. Thank you.
Thank you, Kailee. I call up Evan Bennett, who will present on ancient and modern borders of the land of Israel, past, present, and future.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Evan Bennett. I'm a senior year undergraduate student majoring in international studies with a focus in global security and pursuing a minor in Judaic studies. I'm here to present about the ancient and modern borders in the land of Israel from days past up to the current day and beyond to the future. Just before I begin, to let you know, give a note about the history of the land of Israel. Very historical, very complex, sometimes volatile, and yet very sacred and holy. Carries a lot of history, as there are many people and groups who came in contact with this land and gave it names over the centuries that have changed its borders and boundaries. So to begin, why mapping is important for understanding borders? Well, maps show where borders and boundaries lie. Borders can be shaped by those who are dominating occupants of the land, such as military forces. They can be cultural or communal settlers who come to pillage the land and farm it. And so, depending on where they settle land, they will settle their borders. As you can see here, this is supposed to be the city of Jerusalem, as perceived from a Christian European view. It's placed at the center of the world as a cross point between Europe, Africa, and Asia because it's seen as the beginning of the Bible. And it is a very sacred site which all people must make pilgrimage to. And so they will come to develop their religious beliefs around this land and what the borders will look like. The idea of centric thinking about borders is famous. When I say centric thinking, I can mean social centric or ethnocentric, as that means that people who have certain ties to land based on a shared sense of history, culture, language, genealogy, they will give names their own definitions depending on languages that they speak. So for an example, like here's a 1976 issue of The New Yorker. As I'm not sure if you can tell, but this is supposed to be Manhattan and the Hudson River. And this is supposed to be New Jersey, but it's shown as Colorado. And beyond there, you just skip the Midwest. You go on to the Pacific Ocean, and you have Japan, China, and Russia. Now, I'm not sure if that reflects some sort of ignorant views about Americans who may not understand what's outside of the borders of the US, but it's just based on what they know, based from cultural learning experiences or from what they've heard from others. So, to give an example, for people who may not know much about the land of Israel, some think about Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, every place surrounding Israel, but usually, others might tell you that land of Israel is a very small place with a lot of people and a lot of history to it. And so it's going to be changing names over the centuries. So here are the various names and places within the land of Israel. Here right now I have it named as Canaan. Canaan is named for the original Canaanites, who were the first settlers of the land. Shortly began after prehistory was recorded. The Canaanites are believed to be an outgrowth or a group of Phoenicians in what is today Lebanon, just north of what is today the modern state of Israel. And they, over time, about 5 centuries to at least 1,000 years or so, have begun agricultural communities in the land and settled from what is today Lebanon to southern Israel, perhaps in western, southeastern Syria, in the Golan Heights today. So originally it's named Canaan first. Then come along the Hebrews. The Hebrews, such as Abraham, originated in what is today believed to be Mesopotamia, or modern-day Iraq. And they travel along the Fertile Crescent from the Tigris and Euphrates River over to the land of Canaan. And they begin to settle the land there, as it is promised to them by God in the Bible that they shall settle the land and that their descendants should become numerous. It is believed that the Hebrews mingled with the Canaanites and became the Israelites. Not merely that the Hebrews just traveled to what's the land of Canaan and settled it and became known as Israelites due to their ancestor Jacob, who wrestles with an angel and becomes known as Israel. And so that foundation corresponds with other groups surrounding the Israelites, such as Edomites, Ammonites, Hittites, who are also believed to be Hebrews, but do not settle particularly in what is the land of Israel today because their ancestor is not Jacob or Israel. So as you know, that it was promised to Abraham that his descendants would inherit the land, it becomes known as the Promised Land. And when his descendants begin to settle there, this is where the religious roots of Judaism are laid. And over time, as the religion of Judaism begins, it becomes known as the Holy Land because it's home to many holy sites. It also becomes known as Zion. Zion is named for Mount Zion in Jerusalem, which is adjacent to Mount Moriah, which is where the Temple Mount or the Noble Sanctuary in Jerusalem stands. You guys know about the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. It's supposed to be a site of many messianic prophecies where the Messiah and Judaism shall return, or where Prophet Muhammad and Islam came on his night journey and ascended into heaven. It's seen as a meeting group for all exiles, such as Jews, perhaps Palestinians, who are descendants of all the groups that inhabited the land. I'll get into that soon. Who are supposed to ingather and re-inherit the land. Next, it becomes known as Palestine, which I'll get into later, who get the name from the Romans who come and take over the land during the 1st and 2nd centuries BCE into the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. And the Roman general Hadrian, who had just waged a war against Jewish rebels, wanted to find a way to disconnect the Jews' connection to the land. And he asked one of his other colonels, he says, who are the ancient enemies of the Jews? And one of his generals says, the Philistines. So it's Philistines. So I'll name the land Palestina, which anglicized today is Palestine. The land is also known as southern Syria because before the Romans divided the province, the region of Israel up into various provinces, including Judea, Samaria, it was a part of what is today Syria and was seen as an extension of the land. So you could say that the borders of Syria, what you see today on maps, does not just correspond to this area here, but goes down here too, depending on who you ask. But now is known more commonly, a name that most people can agree on is the Levant. Levantines, so Jews, Arabs, ancient Egyptians, Phoenicians or Lebanese, Syrians and Arameans. People who inhabit this land are known as Levantines. And so it's a common name that all agree on because they're all Levantines. Judea and Samaria. This is a famous name named after the descendants of the Israelites. When the Israelites were divided up into Jews and Samaritans, as they are known today, before that they gained that name, they were known as Judeans and Samaritans. Judea because they were named after their ancestor Judah, and they settled what is today the southern area of the West Bank, central Israel, and the Sumerians, who gained the name from Shomron, or which is now known as Shechem, or the city of Nablus in the West Bank. So, as I say, depending on who inhabited the land or spoke languages that they're spoken there, they got to name the land. So, with all the groups and empires that come in contact with the land, biblical maps do not tell the whole story of the area. There's going to be contradictions depending on who you ask, different versions. And so, as I told you before, Canaanites, Hebrews, and Israelites, and Jews, the ancient Egyptians, all have their own names for it. Starting with the Egyptians, who named the name Pleshtu, which is perhaps where the Philistines were named after their invasion of the land. Philistines, by the way, are believed to be a group of people known as the Sea Peoples, who originated from what is believed to be either today Greece or Turkey, and settled along what is the coast of today the Gaza Strip, so Gaza, and including Ashdod and Ashkelon, which are today in Israel. The ancient Egyptians who fought wars with them to keep Philistines off their land just called them Plishtu because they were seafaring peoples. Plishtu is a name that originates as a foreigner or unknown. Persians came in contact into the land, but they mainly just inhabited the area of Israel and kept the name of Yehud Medinata, which would sound like the state of Israel in modern Hebrew, but just refers to it as a Jewish province. As I told you before, the Romans come in contact and they name the land after the Philistines, ancient enemies of the Israelites, and called the name Palestina, in English today, Palestine. The Arabs, beginning in the 7th century, shortly after the death of the Prophet Muhammad in the 630s CE, began to spread their Islamic Arab empire and come in contact with what is now Palestina, or Palestine, and name the land Philistine, which is still applied to many Arabs who know the area as their own. And then come the Ottoman Turks. The Ottoman Empire did not really give a share of nationalism for the various groups that inhabited lands, such as Jews, Arabs, Circassians, who were people who came from what is today Sochi in Russia. They basically just they named these regions after other regions such as southern Syria or Lebanon. So what's today northern Israel and the northern West Bank was part of a vilayet or province of Beirut, which is the capital of Lebanon today. And the rest was just known as the vilayet of Jerusalem. Today, now you have the Israeli-Palestinians, conflict over the land to Israelis who are not just only Jews, but also Arabs and other groups, see the land of Israel as the borders that they occupy today, plus beyond the boundaries. Depending on who you ask, such as revisionists or religious Zionists, the land of Israel should encompass what is today the modern borders of Israel, Palestine, the Golan Heights, southern Syria up to the Litani River, which is just short of the Bekaa Valley in central eastern Lebanon, going beyond the Golan Heights, almost extending to Damascus, and on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. To them, that is the land of Israel. But seeing that's not really feasible or realistic, what you now have today is just state of Israel, disputed territory in the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. So this is the story of the land of Israel I've been saying before. So now here you have a map here of who the ancient Israelites and Judeans, or should I say Judahites to equivalent them with Israelites, who inhabited the land. This here you see a picture of the divided kingdoms of Israel and Judah, or the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Originally, before this picture was drawn up, it was a united kingdom that expanded both Israel and Judah and extended a little bit northeastward towards Bashan and a little bit more eastwards of Gilead. These two empires, or one empire as I speak now, were descended from 12 tribes of Israel, who were named after the 12 children of Jacob, or Israel as it came to be known, and were allotted land according to agricultural settlements and religious duties. Such as here in Israel, you would have the tribes of Dan, Issachar, and Gideon inhabiting the north. In the south, you have the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, Shimon, and Levi, which I make a point that Levi had no land, but had interspersed communities in between each tribal's land. And then here you have Philistia, where the sea peoples, or the Philistines, who were just one group of the sea peoples, came and inhabited this land and just became a group of city-states just collectively known as Philistia, but they weren't always exactly united. Here you have other Hebrew groups, or non-Israelite Hebrew groups, the Moabites, Ammonites, Edom. And to the north you have Phoenicia, who you can say are the now direct descendants of Canaanites. You have the Arameans, which is today Syria. This was a land known as Amira, but these regions were, I believe this map is termed by an Aramean perception of the land. Shortly before they invaded, it's just an English interpretation. And as you see here, now that you have the exile of the Judahites and Israelites into what is today Iraq, but was then known as Babylonia. In 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire, led by Sargon II, came in and conquered the northern kingdom of Israel and exiled most of its inhabitants into what is today Syria, northern Iraq, southeastern Turkey, and replaced the majority of its inhabitants that were exiled with subjects of its own, Assyrians, and subjects from other empires. These new subjects that came in, the Syrians, and whatever remaining Israelites that were left, intermingled with each other and became known as Sumerians, who are today Samaritans. Judah remained until 586 BCE, until the Babylonian Empire, led by Nebuchadnezzar, took out the Judahites, or Judeans, into what is today modern-day Iraq, western Iran, and also replaced their population, who now are exiled elites and leaders of the Judahite community. The poor were able to stay behind. Some fled to Egypt, and replaced their subjects with Babylonian subjects. And this lasted for about 70 years in the exile of Judah. As for the Israelites who were exiled previously, they are now the 10 lost tribes that we know today. We don't know what happened to them, or we can only speculate as to who the descendants are. What we do know is that Samaritans are just only one of them. So the dispersal, the diaspora of the Jews, almost created a mythical Shangri-La-like place, a utopia picturesque where Jews would one day return. When the Romans came in, beginning in the early 1st to 2nd centuries BCE, they originally had to fight wars with surrounding Greek and Persian empires to take control of the land. And they originally did not move on Jerusalem until after these empires had defeated, and they took over. The Jews that remained in the land had some sort of autonomy, that is until come around the time of Jesus, so 0 AD, and they accepted Roman rule, but it became very strict over time. When I speak of the autonomy that they were given in the 1st and 2nd centuries BCE, these existed in the kingdoms of Hasmonia and Herodia, named after the Hasmoneans, or the Maccabees, who were Jewish warrior priests, and Herodians, named after King Herod, who was a Jewish client king of the Roman Empire. They were interspersed with some violent periods with Romans and other subjects surrounding them, such as Edomites or Anamites, which they later absorbed, and had independence, say, about 120 years or so, and generally ruled their own land, and had a community that extended only just half of what this black blotch was, the Jewish settlement, and had only that land and named that as the land of Israel. Herodians, who then became a client state under the Roman Empire, were allowed to expand their boundaries due to guidance of Roman authorities, and mostly occupy what would be today the northern Galilee to central Jerusalem, the Jerusalem region, what is today the central West Bank, and just to the south to the city of Beersheba, which is in today the Negev Desert in Israel. So as I've said before, now exiles and expulsions shape what is going to be a new perception of the land of Israel. Because now Jews who have been taken out by the Romans due to rebellions and revolts as punishment, they don't see the land of Israel, but they can only picture as to what it looked like, and some go by biblical references. One common famous biblical reference for the land of Israel is known as from Dan to Beersheba. Dan is a city, or was a city, now a archaeological site, and was today northern Galilee here. Beersheba, just out there. Not sure if you guys can really see it because it's so small, but occupies so what is the northern Galilee to the first northern half of the Negev desert. So over time, anti-Semitism, persecution, expulsion, seclusion really takes a toll on the Jewish populations outside of the land of Israel, particularly in Europe. And so some see Zionism, or Jewish nationalism, a right to self-declaration in what is believed to be their ancient historical homeland, to establish a new community, which will later become a state in the land of Israel. So as you can see here, these are Jewish populations who traveled outside of Europe, some to the US, some to Latin America, South Africa, and some go to what is then known as Palestine. According to where these Jewish Zionists settled the land, they will establish the borders. So say some Jews settled in the Galilee and some along the coastal plain, which becomes a common place for Jews to settle land because it's very fertile. They only establish what is going to be proposed borders in the Galilee and what is today Tel Aviv along the Mediterranean Sea. And so, although they would like to settle what they believed would be the land of Israel, including the West Bank today and southern desert, Negev, they also have to go by religious references because, as I said before, the descendants of exiles had never seen what Israel looked like. So they just go and they settle the lands along the coastal plains where they find archaeological remnants, fertile lands, and sort of say seclusion from other Arab communities. So here you can see that these are lands of Israel from the 7th to 20th.